All right, we are on section 9.2-2 and we are dealing with our half angle formulas. So here are three half angle formulas. We have sine, cosine, and tangent. Sine and cosine are very, very similar to each other. The only thing that changes is that for sine we have a plus or minus square root of 1 minus cosine of theta all over 2. And then cosine we still have the plus or minus square root of 1 plus cosine over 2. So the only thing that changes with these guys is the sine is going to be a negative cosine, and then the cosine is going to be that plus cosine of theta. Now tangent, we already know our tangent ratio is just sine of theta all over cosine of theta. So our tangent for the half angle formula is very similar to that. The only thing that changes is our bottom is just the 1 plus cosine of theta. Now with our half angle formulas, we are dealing with radicals, so we are going to have to go ahead and determine whether or not we are dealing with a positive or a negative for both our sine and our cosine. So here's our new 3. We will have to go ahead and memorize these guys. The next question, it just says, consider all of the half angle formulas below, and it's asking us what is the relationship between these angles. So we have sine of 3 theta is equal to the plus or minus radical of 1 minus cosine of 6 theta all over 2. We have a sine of 7 theta is equal to a plus or minus square root of 1 minus cosine of 14 theta all over 2. And then we have a sine of theta divided by 8 is equal to a plus or minus square root of 1 minus cosine of theta divided by 4 all over 2. Now here we can go ahead and see that 3 theta is just half of 6 theta. We have 7 theta is half of our 14 theta. And then we have theta divided by 8 is just half of theta all over 4. So in this case, we'll always have to go ahead and double whatever our angle is into our formula. So for example 5, it's asked us to find the exact value, so that means we're going to have to leave one of our answers in radical form, and then give the decimal approximation. We'll go ahead and plug those into our calculators. So it says evaluate cosine of 105 degrees using our half angle formula. Now given the past sections, we know how to calculate the cosine of 105 degrees given our sum and differences formulas that we learned a while back ago. In this case, we can go ahead and find two numbers that either add and subtract to get that 105 degrees. However, now we're dealing with our half angle formulas. So we are dealing with cosine, so I'm going to go ahead and rewrite that formula for cosine. So we have the plus or minus square root 1 plus cosine of theta all over 2. So we are dealing with the cosine of 105 degrees is equal to the plus or minus square root of 1 plus cosine. So now since we're dealing with our angle measurements, we're going to go ahead and double the 105 degrees, and that will give us a cosine of 210, all divided by 2. So I hope we did not forget our unit circle. That would be 210 degrees. Our ordered pair would be a negative root 3 all over 2, and a negative 1/2. So from now, we can go ahead and just plug and chug what we know. So we have 1 plus the cosine of 210 degrees is that negative root 3 all over 2 divided by 2. And then we can go ahead and keep on simplifying. So we have a nasty complex fraction. So I'm going to go ahead and find a common denominator for my numerator. So this becomes 2 minus root 3 all over 2 divided by 2. Again, with the complex fractions, I can go ahead and take the 2 minus root 3 all over 2, and I'm going to go ahead and multiply that 2. I'm going to flip that fraction, so I'm going to actually multiply it by our reciprocal. So we have a plus or minus the square root of a 2 minus root 3 all over 4. If I were to go ahead and separate my radicals, we would have a radical 4 on the bottom And so we can actually go ahead and simplify this guy to a 2 minus root 3 all over 2. Now this is when we have to go ahead and figure out if we are dealing with a positive or a negative final answer. So I'm going to go back to this little drawing I did up here. 105 degrees is about there. So that means that our cosine is negative. So our ending exact answer is going to be a negative root 2 minus root 3 all over 2. Now if we were to go ahead and plug this guy into our calculators, our approximate answer would be a negative 0.2588. And we are done. Okay, so now for example 6, it says suppose cosine of theta is equal to a root 2 over 2. And it says that our theta is in between 0 degrees and 90 degrees. So in this case, we're going to be dealing with quadrant 1. And it's asking us to find all of the half angles for sine, cosine, and tangent. So let's go ahead and find out our sine. So I have my plus or minus the square root of 1 minus cosine of theta all over 2. Now here it's not asking for a specific angle measurement like how it did in example 5. All we can do now is just take our cosine of theta and go ahead and plug that guy right into our formula. So we have the plus or minus the square root of 1 minus root 2 all over 2 divided by 2. And again, we were dealing with a complex fraction. So I'm going to go ahead and find a common denominator for my numerator. So I have a 2 minus root 2 all over 2 divided by 2. I hope by now that we can find out that there's a pattern for these types of problems. So this becomes a 2 minus root 2 all over 4. And then to simplify this guy even more, we have a 2 minus root 2 divided by 2. All I did right there was just simplify that radical 4. Since now we are dealing with the quadrant of the first quadrant, we also know that our sine and our cosine is going to be positive. So here we are dealing with a positive answer. So this is my final answer. So I'm going to go ahead and let you go and stop the video for right now and try doing part B. Okay, so let's go on to part B. We're now dealing with a half angle formula for cosine. So this is a plus or minus square root of 1 plus cosine of theta divided by 2. And again, I'm going to go ahead and plug in my cosine value of root 2 over 2. So we have 1 plus square root 2 all over 2 divided by 2. If we keep simplifying this, I'm going to go ahead and get a radical 2 plus radical 2 divided by 4. And again, this was going to go ahead and simplify to a radical 2 plus radical 2 divided by 2. And again, our cosine is positive, so I'm just going to leave my answer as a positive answer. Now for tangent, there are two ways to solve this problem. So for tangent, I have my regular tangent ratio is just sine of my half angle and then cosine of my half angle as well. So this is one way to solve for tangent, is just using our original tangent ratio. And here we can go ahead and plug in what we found for both sine and cosine and go ahead and plug it in. So my sine was a radical 2 minus radical 2 divided by 2. And my cosine was radical 2 plus radical 2 divided by 2. So we have a fraction divided by a fraction. I'm going to go ahead and multiply by the reciprocal of my second fraction, which becomes 2 divided by that root 2 plus root 2. And my 2's cancel out, so I'm just left over with the radical 2 minus radical 2 all over radical 2 plus radical 2. Now I know that we've said in the past that we would love for you all to go ahead and rationalize your denominator. However, that would be a lot of crazy math, so we are okay with you leaving your answer like this. Now that was just using our knowledge of a trig function for tangent. But let's go ahead and try solving it with the formula that we just learned. So this is the second method. to find the tangent of our half angle. And that formula was just sine of theta all over 1 plus cosine of theta. Now it gave us cosine of theta as a root 2 over 2. I hope we know by now that the sine of theta would also be root 2 over 2. So we have root 2 over 2 divided by 1 plus root 2 over 2. And again, go ahead and find your common denominator for our denominator portion. So this becomes 2 plus root 2 all over 2. So we have a fraction divided by fraction. I'm going to go ahead and multiply by the reciprocal of the second fraction. So then our 2's cancel out, and we're left over with a radical 2 all over 2 plus root 2. Now we've seen this guy before. This is when we're going to go ahead and multiply by the conjugate. So this is 2 minus radical 2, 2 minus radical 2. So for my numerator, I'm going to go ahead and just distribute. This becomes 2 radical 2 minus 2. And my denominator, we're going to go ahead and FOIL. So my first, outer, inner, last. This becomes 4 minus 2 root 2 plus 2 root 2 minus 2. Those 2 root 2's cancel out, so we just get a 2 radical 2 minus 2 all over 2. And here we don't have to worry about killing kittens, so this will just go ahead and reduce to a radical 2 minus 1. Now if I were to go ahead and plug in both of these answers for tangent into my calculator, we should get the exact same thing. So I went ahead and did that already, and we could see that both of these answers are going to give us 0.414. And we're done. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to example 7. It says, given that sine of theta is equal to a negative 1